Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, by Robert B. Cialdini. Introduction. Imagine you're the owner of a small jewelry store in Arizona. It's the peak of tourist season, your store is bustling, but there's one particular display of turquoise jewelry that just won't sell. The pieces are beautiful, the quality is good, and the price is fair, but for some reason, customers walk right past them. You try everything. You move the display to the center of the store, right in the main flow of traffic. Nothing. You instruct your sales staff to push the items, to really talk them up. Still nothing. Finally, the night before you have to leave on a buying trip, you're completely fed up. You scribble a quick, frustrated note to your head saleswoman. Everything in this display case, price times 1/2. You just want to get rid of the pieces, even if it means taking a loss. You come back a few days later, and you're not surprised to see that every single piece has been sold. You are, however, completely shocked to discover how they were sold. Your saleswoman had misread your messy handwriting. She didn't read price X half, she read price X2. Every single piece of jewelry had sold, at double the original price. How is that possible? What strange force of human psychology could make people rush to buy something that was suddenly more expensive? It seems to defy all logic. But it's not logic that's at work here. It's something deeper, something more primitive. For decades, one man made it his life's work to understand these hidden forces. His name is Robert Cialdini, and he didn't just study them from a distance. He became a spy. He went undercover, infiltrating the worlds of car salesmen, real estate agents, telemarketers, and charity fundraisers. He wanted to learn the secrets of the compliance professionals, the people whose entire livelihood depends on getting you to say yes. What he discovered were 7 secret psychological levers, or weapons of influence, that can trigger an almost automatic response in all of us. These are the hidden switches in our brains that, when flipped, make us comply without even thinking. His book, Influence, has sold over 5 million copies and has become a legendary text, studied by everyone from marketing executives and world leaders to ordinary people who just want to understand why they sometimes find themselves agreeing to things they never intended to. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on these 7 principles. I promise you, by the end of our time together, you won't just understand why that turquoise jewelry sold out. You'll see the world through a new lens. You'll finally understand the invisible scripts that guide your decisions, and you'll be equipped to not only recognize when they're being used on you but also to use them, ethically, to become more persuasive in your own life. This isn't just a book summary, it's a field guide to the human mind. So, let's begin. Book summary. To understand the mystery of the expensive jewelry, we have to start with a story about a mother turkey. Now, mother turkeys are wonderful mothers. They are loving, watchful, and fiercely protective of their chicks. But there's something peculiar about their mothering instinct. Scientists discovered it's triggered by one very specific sound, the cheep cheep of a young turkey chick. If a chick makes that sound, its mother will care for it. If it doesn't, she will ignore it, or in some cases, even kill it. This reliance is so absolute, it's almost mechanical. Researchers demonstrated this in a now famous experiment. A polecat is a natural predator of the turkey. When the researchers pulled a stuffed polecat on a string toward a mother turkey, she attacked it furiously, squawking, pecking, and clawing. But then, they put a small tape recorder inside the stuffed polecat that played the cheep cheep sound of a baby turkey. The result was astonishing. As the stuffed enemy approached, the mother turkey didn't attack. Instead, she heard the cheep cheep, and her maternal instincts took over. She gathered the stuffed polecat underneath her, as if it were her own chick. When the researchers turned the recorder off, she immediately went back to attacking it viciously. It's what scientists call a fixed action pattern. A trigger, in this case, the cheep cheep sound, activates a pre-programmed tape of behavior. The turkey doesn't think, it just acts. It's a shortcut. Click, run. The sound clicks the tape on, and the behavior runs. Now, it's easy to laugh at the turkey. But before we get too smug, we need to realize something profound. We humans have our own pre-programmed tapes. We have our own mental shortcuts that, most of the time, serve us well. But they can also be triggered to make us behave in ways that are just as automatic, and just as foolish, as that mother turkey. One of the most powerful of these shortcuts is the simple rule, expensive equals good. Think about it. We've learned through experience that you often get what you pay for. A more expensive car usually has better engineering. A more expensive suit is often made with better fabric. Over time, this useful rule of thumb gets condensed in our minds to a simple, automatic judgment. The tourists in that Arizona jewelry store knew very little about turquoise. They were in a state of uncertainty. So, to judge the quality, they reached for their shortcut. When the price was doubled, their internal expensive equals good tape was triggered. Click, run. Suddenly, the jewelry seemed far more valuable and desirable, and they bought it all. The only thing that changed was the price tag, but in their minds, everything changed. This idea of click, run is the foundation of everything we're about to explore. Our world is more complex and fast-paced than ever before. We are bombarded with more information in a single day than our ancestors were in a lifetime. We simply don't have the time or mental energy to carefully analyze every single decision. So, we rely on shortcuts. And it's these very shortcuts that form the basis of the 7 most powerful levers of influence. The first of these levers is so deeply ingrained in us that it forms the very fabric of human society. It's the principle of reciprocation. A few years ago, a university professor tried a little experiment. He sent Christmas cards to a group of complete strangers. He expected some reaction, but what he got was astonishing. Holiday cards came pouring back from people who had never met him, never heard of him. They received a card, and an automatic program kicked in. Click, run. They sent one back. The rule of reciprocation says that we should try to repay, in kind, what another person has provided us. If someone does you a favor, you feel an obligation to do one for them in return. It's the social glue that allows us to build trust and cooperate. It's so fundamental that the archaeologist Richard Leakey argued it's the very essence of what makes us human. Our ancestors learned to share food and skills in an honored network of obligation. But this powerful social rule can also be used as a weapon of influence. A psychologist named Dennis Regan conducted a simple but brilliant experiment. A person in the study, let's call him Joe, would leave during a short break and return with 2 bottles of Coke, one for himself, and one as an unsolicited gift for the other participant. For another group of participants, Joe returned empty-handed. Later, Joe asked all the participants to do him a favor. He was selling raffle tickets and asked if they'd be willing to buy some. The people who had received the free Coke bought twice as many raffle tickets as those who hadn't. That might seem obvious. But here's the fascinating part. The researchers also measured how much the participants liked Joe. As you'd expect, people who liked him bought more tickets. But for the group that got the Coke, liking made no difference at all. Even people who said they disliked Joe bought just as many tickets as those who liked him. The feeling of indebtedness from the rule of reciprocation was so powerful it completely overrode the influence of personal liking. This is why organizations like the Hare Krishnas, who used to give people a free flower in airports, were so successful. People didn't want the flower, but once they accepted it, they felt an awkward obligation to give a donation. You've been given something. You must give something back. A more subtle, And perhaps more powerful application of this rule is the rejection then retreat technique, also known as the door in the face. Cialdini tells a personal story. He was walking down the street when a Boy Scout approached him and asked if he'd like to buy tickets to the annual circus for $5 apiece. Cialdini declined. "Well," the boy said, "if you don't want to buy any tickets, how about buying some of our chocolate bars? They're only $1 each." Cialdini bought 2. And as he walked away, he realized what had happened. He doesn't like chocolate bars. He does like his dollars. Yet, he was walking away with 2 chocolate bars he didn't want, and the boy was walking away with 2 of his dollars. What happened? The boy had made a concession. He retreated from a large request $5 tickets to a small $1 chocolate bars. By doing so, he triggered the reciprocity rule. He had given Cialdini a concession, so Cialdini felt an unconscious pressure to offer a concession in return, by moving from no to yes. This technique is incredibly effective. In one experiment, researchers posing as youth counselors asked college students if they would be willing to chaperone a group of juvenile delinquents on a day trip to the zoo. Only 17% agreed. But for another group, they first asked for a much larger favor. Would they be willing to serve as a counselor for these delinquents for 2 hours a week for the next 2 years? Everyone refused this absurd request. But when the researchers then retreated to the smaller request, the one-day zoo trip, the agreement rate tripled to 50%. The large initial request makes the second request seem smaller by comparison, and the retreat triggers our need to reciprocate the concession. It's a 1-2 punch that's hard to resist. This simple principle explains everything from how we negotiate a price for a car to, as Cialdini suggests, how the disastrous Watergate break-in was approved. The initial plan proposed by G. Gordon Liddy was a $1 million scheme involving kidnapping and blackmail. After that was rejected, his scaled-down, bare-bones $250,000 plan to bug the Democratic headquarters seemed almost reasonable by comparison. It was a concession, and the committee felt they had to give him something in return. So, the first lever is what we feel we owe to others. The second is about how we feel about them. This brings us to the principle of liking. It's no surprise that we're more likely to say yes to people we know and like. But what might be surprising is how easily that liking can be manufactured. Compliance professionals have mastered the science of making us like them, and they do it by leveraging a few key factors. The first is physical attractiveness. We have a subconscious click-run response to good-looking people. It's called the halo effect. When one positive characteristic, like attractiveness, dominates the way we see a person, we automatically assign them other positive traits like talent, kindness, and intelligence. Studies have shown that attractive political candidates get more votes, attractive job applicants are more likely to be hired, and attractive people are more persuasive in changing an audience's opinion. We do this without even realizing our bias is at play. The second factor is similarity. We like people who are like us. It's a simple but profound truth. Salespeople are trained to look for clues about your background, your hobbies, your interests. If they see camping gear in your car, they might mention how they love the outdoors. If you're wearing a sports team's jersey, they'll tell you how much they love that team. These may seem like trivial connections, but they build a subtle bond of liking that makes us more compliant. The third factor is compliments. We are phenomenal suckers for flattery. Joe Girard, who was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the greatest car salesman, understood this perfectly. His secret to success was simple. He made his customers like him. And how did he do it? Every single month, he sent every one of his 13,000 former customers a card. The greeting changed with the holiday, but the message inside was always the same. I like you. A simple, mass-produced statement of liking, and it made him a fortune. Because even when we know flattery is insincere, it still works. And the fourth factor is contact and cooperation. We like things that are familiar to us. But repeated contact doesn't always lead to liking. If the contact happens under unpleasant, competitive conditions, it can actually lead to dislike. This was powerfully demonstrated in a classic study by the social psychologist Muzafer Sharif. He took a group of boys at a summer camp and divided them into two groups, the Eagles and the Rattlers. He then fostered rivalry by putting them in direct competition with each other in games like tug-of-war and treasure hunts. The result was intense hostility. The boys started name-calling, raiding each other's cabins, and getting into fights. Then, Sharif tried to undo the damage. He brought them together for pleasant activities like movies and meals. It only made things worse. The food fights and shouting matches escalated. Finally, he tried a new strategy. He manufactured a series of crises that forced the two groups to cooperate. Their camp truck broke down, and all the boys had to work together to pull it up a hill. The camp's water supply failed, and they all had to team up to find the problem. The effect was transformative. As they worked together toward common goals, the hostility melted away. They started sharing, becoming friends, and seeing each other not as rivals, but as allies. Cooperation had forged a powerful bond of liking. This is the principle behind the good cop/bad cop routine. The bad cop creates a sense of threat and conflict, while the good cop appears to be your ally, your teammate, working with you toward a common goal, getting you a lighter sentence. This feeling of cooperation and liking makes a confession far more likely. But our decisions aren't just shaped by a single person we feel indebted to or one we like. We are social creatures, and we are constantly looking around us for clues on how to behave. This leads us to the third, and perhaps most pervasive, lever of influence: social proof. The principle is simple. We view a behavior as more correct in a given situation to the degree that we see others performing it. If a restaurant is packed with people, we assume the food must be good. If a joke is followed by a chorus of laughter, we assume it must be funny. Canned laugh tracks on TV sitcoms exist for this very reason. Studies show they make us laugh longer and more often, and rate the material as funnier, even though we know the laughter is fake. We see others doing it, so we do it too. Advertisers love this principle. That's why they tell us a product is the fastest growing or largest selling. They don't have to convince you the product is good, they just have to convince you that everyone else thinks it is. But this reliance on the crowd can lead us into profound error, sometimes with tragic consequences. In the mid-20th century, a team of social scientists led by Leon Festinger infiltrated a doomsday cult in Chicago. The group was led by a woman, Marian Keech, who claimed to be receiving messages from aliens called the Guardians. They had prophesied that a great flood would destroy the world on a specific date, but that all true believers would be rescued by a flying saucer at midnight. The group's commitment was absolute. Members quit their jobs, sold their belongings, and cut ties with skeptical family members. They had given up everything for their belief. But they were strangely secretive. They made no effort to recruit new members or publicize their message. They believed they had the one and only truth, and they kept it to themselves. The researchers were in the house with the believers on the fateful night. As midnight approached, the group sat in tense silence, having removed all metal from their clothing to be ready for the spaceship. The clock struck 12. Nothing happened. The minutes ticked by in painful silence. The group was plunged into a state of confusion and despair. The physical proof, the hard reality, had completely disconfirmed their central belief. They seemed on the verge of collapse. Then, at 4:45 a.m., Mrs. Keech's hand began to write a new message. It was from the Guardians. The message explained that the little group, by sitting and believing all night, had spread so much light that God had decided to save the world from destruction. The group was saved. Their belief was intact. But then something even more extraordinary happened. Mrs. Keach received another message. She must immediately publicize this news to the world. The group that had been pathologically secretive for months suddenly became zealous missionaries. They called newspapers, radio stations, and wire services. They threw open their doors to reporters and anyone who would listen. Why? Because when the physical evidence had failed them, only one other source of proof remained: social proof. If they could persuade others to believe, if they could recruit new converts, then in their own minds, their beliefs would become more true. The greater the number of people who find any idea correct, the more correct the idea will be perceived to be. They had to convince, so they themselves could be convinced. This principle is most powerful in two conditions. The first is uncertainty. When we are unsure of ourselves, we are most likely to look to the actions of others to guide us. The second is similarity. We are most influenced by the actions of people who are just like us. This leads to a disturbing phenomenon that Cialdini calls the Werther effect, named after an 18th-century novel that sparked a wave of copycat suicides across Europe. Sociologist David Phillips discovered that after a suicide is highly publicized in the media, the suicide rate in that area increases dramatically. It's a morbid form of social proof. Troubled individuals, seeing that another person has chosen suicide, come to view it as a more legitimate option for themselves. The effect is eerily specific. If the publicized suicide is a young person, the copycat suicides are mostly young people. If it's an older person, the copycats are older. The principle of similarity is at work. Even more frightening, Phillips found that stories of single-victim suicides were followed by an increase in single-fatality car and plane crashes. Stories of suicide murder incidents were followed by an increase in multiple fatality crashes. He argues these aren't accidents. They are hidden copycat suicides, staged to look accidental. The sheer power of social proof is so strong, it can even influence the fundamental decision of life and death. This same combination of uncertainty and similarity helps to explain the almost incomprehensible tragedy of the Jonestown mass suicide. Reverend Jim Jones moved his followers from San Francisco to a remote jungle in Guyana, South America. In this new, alien environment, they were completely uncertain. Their only source of social proof, their only similar others, were the other members of the community. When Jones called for mass suicide, the first few fanatically obedient members calmly drank the poison. That act provided powerful social proof for the uncertain crowd. Each person looked to those around them, and seeing only a calm, orderly line, concluded that waiting patiently was the correct behavior. It was a massive, tragic instance of what psychologists call pluralistic ignorance. Everyone was waiting for someone else to act, and so no one did. The herd mentality took over, and over 900 people died. Jim Jones' real genius wasn't just his personal charisma, it was his understanding of how to engineer a situation where the principle of social proof would do his work for him. So, we've seen how we're influenced by our debts, by our friends, and by the crowd. But there's another force, perhaps the most relentless of all, that comes not from the outside, but from within. It's our deep-seated need to be consistent. This is the fourth lever: commitment and consistency. Have you ever noticed that just after you place a bet on a horse, you feel much more confident about its chances of winning? Or right after you cast your vote in an election, you feel more certain that your candidate is the right choice? Nothing has actually changed, but in your mind, everything has. This is the power of commitment. Once we make a choice or take a stand, we face enormous personal and interpersonal pressure to behave consistently with that commitment. We will fool ourselves, tell ourselves stories, and invent new reasons to justify our decision. The desire to be consistent is a powerful motivator. In one experiment on a New York beach, a researcher would place a towel and a radio near a random person, and then walk away. A second researcher, acting as a thief, would then come and snatch the radio. Under normal circumstances, only 4 out of 20 people intervened. But in the second condition, the first researcher would ask the person, "Could you please watch my things?" Everyone agreed. Now, when the thief came, 19 out of 20 people sprang into action, chasing the thief down and grabbing the radio back. They had made a small, initial commitment, and their subsequent actions were a powerful, automatic follow-through. This is the principle behind the famous foot in the door technique. You start with a small, easy-to-get request, which then paves the way for a larger, related request. The classic experiment involved asking homeowners if they would be willing to display a small, 3-inch sign in their window that read, "Be a safe driver." Nearly everyone agreed. But 2 weeks later, when another volunteer asked these same homeowners if they would be willing to put a huge, ugly Drive Carefully billboard on their front lawn, a shocking 76% of them said yes. A similar group that hadn't been asked to display the small sign first had only a 17% agreement rate. Why? The small initial commitment changed their self-image. They began to see themselves as public-spirited citizens who cared about driver safety. When the larger request came, they complied to be consistent with this new self-image. This is how the Chinese brainwashing of American POWs during the Korean War worked. They didn't use torture. They started small. They would ask prisoners to make very mild anti-American statements, like "the United States is not perfect." Once a prisoner agreed, he would be asked to list some of these imperfections. Then to write them down. Then to read them in a discussion group. With each step, the prisoner was building a case against his own country in his own handwriting. He would change his self-image to be consistent with his actions, eventually seeing himself as a collaborator and becoming even more cooperative. For a commitment to be truly powerful, it needs to be active, public, and effortful. That's why fraternities have such grueling and often dangerous hazing rituals. The more effort a pledge has to put into joining the group, the more valuable and attractive the group becomes in his mind. He has to justify the effort he expended. But the most powerful commitments are those we feel we have made of our own free choice. This is why large bribes and threats are often ineffective at creating lasting change. They don't generate inner responsibility. This brings us to a devious sales tactic called the lowball. A car salesman might offer you an incredible deal, hundreds of dollars below the competition. You get excited, you make the decision to buy. You start filling out the paperwork, arranging financing, and in your mind, the car is already yours. Then, the salesman comes back, looking apologetic. There's been a mistake in the calculation, or his manager won't approve the deal. The price is suddenly hundreds of dollars higher. A rational person would walk away. But many people don't. They've already made the commitment. They've started to generate their own new reasons for buying the car. Their decision has grown its own legs, and even when the original reason, the great price, is kicked out from under it, the decision still stands. This drive for consistency is a hobgoblin of the mind, as the philosopher Emerson said. It locks us into courses of action, sometimes foolish ones, just for the sake of staying true to a decision we made in the past. But if consistency is about what we might keep, the fifth lever is about what we might lose. This is the powerful principle of scarcity. Opportunities seem more valuable to us when their availability is limited. This is the simple, powerful idea behind limited time offer and only a few left in stock. Sales pitches. The fear of loss is a more powerful motivator than the prospect of gain. This is a core idea of psychological reactance theory. When our freedom to have something is limited, our desire for it skyrockets. We want what we can't have. This is the force behind the Romeo and Juliet effect. When parents forbid a teenage romance, it doesn't stamp out the passion, it often intensifies it. The lovers feel a greater bond and a stronger desire for each other, precisely because their freedom to be together is being threatened. Censorship works the same way. When information is banned, we want to receive it more, and we become more favorable to it before we've even heard it. When students at the University of North Carolina were told a speech opposing co-ed dorms had been banned, they became more opposed to co-ed dorms, without ever hearing a single argument. The mere fact that the information was scarce made it seem more valuable and more true. Scarcity is most powerful under two conditions. First, we value things that have become newly scarce more than things that have been scarce all along. Revolutions, for instance, are more often started not by people who have always been oppressed, but by those who have had a taste of a better life and then have it taken away. Freedoms, once granted, will not be given up without a fight. Second, we are most attracted to scarce resources when we have to compete for them. This is the psychology behind auctions and bidding wars. The frenzy of competition short-circuits our rational mind. The desire to win overtakes the desire for the item itself. My brother, Cialdini writes, used to support himself through school by buying used cars, cleaning them up, and reselling them a week later for a profit. He'd place an ad in the paper, and when potential buyers called, he'd schedule them all to show up at the exact same time. The first buyer would arrive and start kicking the tires. But the moment the second buyer pulled up, the entire dynamic changed. Suddenly, it was a competition. The car was a scarce resource. The first buyer felt a jolt of urgency. If he didn't decide now, he might lose it to that other person lurking over there. The rivalry would turn a hesitant browser into a zealous buyer. This powerful emotional arousal is why scarcity is so hard to defend against. When we feel that rush of wanting something that's limited or contested, our thinking brain shuts down. The key is to use that arousal as a signal. When you feel it, pause. Step back. And ask yourself the crucial question, why do I want this? Is it for the utility of the item? To drive it? To eat it? To use it? Or is it merely for the thrill of possessing something rare? Remember, scarce things don't drive better, taste better, or work better. The joy is often in the possessing, not the experiencing. Now we arrive at the sixth lever of influence, a principle so profound it's considered the very foundation of authority, the principle of authority. We are trained from birth to obey legitimate authorities. Parents, teachers, doctors, judges, we learn that their directives are usually correct and beneficial. This deference is a useful shortcut. It saves us the trouble of having to become an expert in every field. But this automatic obedience can be dangerous. It can cause us to shut off our own critical thinking and follow orders, even when they make no sense. The most famous, and chilling, demonstration of this was conducted by psychologist Stanley Milgram. He told volunteers they were participating in a study on memory and learning. Their job was to act as a teacher and deliver electric shocks to a learner in another room every time the learner made a mistake. The shock machine had switches ranging from 15 volts all the way up to 450 volts, labeled danger, severe shock. The learner was actually an actor, and no shocks were really delivered. But the teacher didn't know that. As the experiment went on, the learner would begin to grunt in pain, then shout, then scream in agony, begging for the experiment to stop, complaining of a heart condition. If the teacher hesitated, the experimenter in the white lab coat, the authority figure, would simply say, "Please continue." Before the study, Milgram surveyed psychiatrists, who predicted that only a tiny fraction of people, the most sadistic fringe, would go all the way to 450 volts. The actual result? 2/3 of the participants, ordinary, decent people just like you and me, delivered the maximum shock, continuing to press the switch even when the learner had fallen into a deathly silence. They weren't sadists. They were sweating, trembling, and pleading with the experimenter to stop. But when the calm, firm authority figure told them to continue, they obeyed. It's the extreme willingness of adults to go to almost any lengths on the command of an authority. Because we are so vulnerable to the substance of authority, we are often just as vulnerable to its symbols. 3 of the most powerful symbols are titles, clothing, and trappings. A simple title like doctor or professor can make people see you as taller and more credible. A uniform, like that of a security guard, can make people obey bizarre requests, like giving a stranger a dime for a parking meter, even after the guard has walked away. A well-tailored business suit can cause pedestrians to follow a man jaywalking into traffic. These symbols trigger our click-run response to authority, even when there's no real substance behind them. And that brings us to the 7th and final principle, one Cialdini added to the book in its latest edition. It's a principle that goes beyond mere liking or similarity. It's the principle of unity. This principle states that we say yes to people we consider one of us. It's not about being like someone, it's about sharing an identity. The we is the shared me. This is the deepest level of connection, rooted in categories like family, race, nationality, political affiliation, or religion. When we feel a sense of unity, the normal rules of influence don't just get stronger, they become almost second nature. We trust, agree with, and help our people far more readily than outsiders. This explains affinity fraud, where scammers prey on members of their own ethnic or religious group. Bernard Madoff's massive Ponzi scheme disproportionately victimized members of the Jewish community, not because they were less intelligent, but because he was one of them. The trust that comes with a shared identity is a powerful, and sometimes dangerous, shortcut. The 2 most powerful ways to create a sense of unity are belonging together and acting together. Belonging together is most powerfully expressed through kinship. We will do almost anything for our family because we see them as an extension of ourselves. That's why a communicator like Warren Buffett can be so persuasive when he frames his financial advice by saying, "I will tell you what I would say to my family." It triggers that deep, familial sense of trust. Place is another powerful source of unity. Being from the same home, neighborhood, or region creates a special bond. Cialdini tells the incredible story of a Nazi concentration camp guard who was tasked with executing every 10th prisoner in a line. He proceeded mechanically until he came to one man, looked at him, and then skipped him, shooting the 11th man instead. The reason? He recognized the man as being from his hometown. In the midst of committing mass murder, a feeling of shared place was powerful enough to create a moment of mercy. Acting together is the second path to unity. When we move in synchrony with others, marching, dancing, singing, or chanting together, we begin to feel a sense of merger with them. It's why armies march in unison and why collective singing is a part of almost every culture and religion. It blurs the line between self and other, and it fosters immense loyalty and cooperation. This is why asking for advice is such a powerful influence technique. When you ask someone for advice, you aren't just getting their opinion, you are inviting them into a state of co-creation with you. You are making them your partner. As the novelist Saul Bellow said, when we ask for advice, we are usually looking for an accomplice. By asking, you create a sense of we, and that person becomes more invested in your success. And so, we've journeyed through the 7 great levers of influence: reciprocation, liking, social proof, commitment, and consistency, scarcity, authority, and unity. They are the shortcuts our brains use to navigate the world, the invisible forces that shape our decisions every single day. Commentary. When you finish a book like Influence, it's almost like you've been given a pair of glasses that lets you see the hidden code running the world around you. Suddenly, the seemingly random and irrational behaviors of people start to make a frightening amount of sense. The power of Robert Cialdini's work isn't just that he identified these 7 principles. It's that he showed how they are not flaws in our programming, but features. These shortcuts, reciprocation, social proof, authority, exist for a reason. They are the product of millions of years of evolution, designed to help us make good decisions quickly and efficiently. Most of the time, they steer us right. Trusting an expert, following the crowd, repaying a favor, these are generally smart things to do. The danger arises in our modern world, where these ancient triggers can be artificially stimulated by people who understand them better than we do. The compliance professionals aren't creating new motivations, they are simply hijacking the ones that are already there. And in today's world, this is more relevant than ever. Think about social media. It's a massive engine of social proof. The number of likes, shares, and followers serves as a constant, visible signal of what the crowd is doing, thinking, and valuing. It creates a powerful pressure to conform. Think about online marketing. Scarcity is everywhere. Countdown timers on sales pages, only 2 left in stock notifications. These are all designed to trigger your fear of loss and push you toward an immediate decision. Think about our politically polarized world. The principle of unity has been weaponized. We no longer just disagree with the other side, we see them as a different tribe, an outgroup. This we versus them mentality makes it easier to accept information from our own side, no matter how questionable, and instantly reject information from the other, no matter how factual. So, what do? The answer isn't to become a cynical hermit, distrusting everyone and analyzing every decision to death. That's impossible. The answer is to become a more mindful participant in the world. Cialdini's ultimate defense is simple but profound: awareness. Here are a few practical actions you can start taking today. First, learn to recognize the feeling of being rushed. Scarcity and competition create a visceral, emotional arousal. When you feel that panicky urge to buy something right now because it's the last one or the deal is about to end, use that feeling as your signal. Stop. Take a breath. And ask yourself, do I truly want this for its own sake, or am I just reacting to the pressure of losing it? Second, be incredibly cautious about small, initial commitments. The next time someone asks you to sign a simple petition or answer a quick survey, pause for a moment. Ask yourself what larger request might be coming down the road. You're not just signing a piece of paper, you may be unconsciously adjusting your self-image, making you vulnerable to the next, bigger ask. Third, and this is a big one, mentally separate the requester from the request. This is especially important when you find yourself really liking someone who is trying to sell you something. It's a wonderful thing to connect with another person, but remember, if you buy the car, you're driving the car off the lot, not the salesperson. Ask yourself, if this person I like so much were not the one offering this deal, would I still want it? Judge the merits of the offer, not the messenger. Influence isn't a book about tricks and manipulation. At its heart, it's a book about human nature. It's about the beautifully efficient, and sometimes tragically flawed, ways we navigate our social world. That was a summary of Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert B. Cialdini. We've journeyed through the core principles today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you explore the territory yourself. The true power of this book lies in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own experience and a light bulb goes on in your mind. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or made you see your own decisions in a new light, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just an act of learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. There's a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that subscribe button and give this a thumbs up. It tells us we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.